Hi to all the attendees. We're back again, this time again with another panel discussion. Like I mentioned earlier, I hope everybody had a good time at the GEO clinic. We'll just continue with the next topic, which is winning the new search game, a CMO's guide to success in the AI era, which I personally think is the next pressing topic. Search is being rewritten, discovery, trust, and visibility. They're now living inside generative engines, and CMOs are facing a new reality with traditional matrices, and the old playbooks no longer apply. Today's panel, today's panel, we will explore how marketing leaders can navigate the AI-driven landscape, balance performance and brand, and also future-proof the strategies. To talk about this more, we have some of the most relevant people, some of the experts in the industry. I will start with introducing Travis. Travis leads SEO at Brain Labs, one of the world's fastest growing digital agencies. With deep expertise in technical SEO, growth marketing, and enterprise search engines, he has helped global brands like Microsoft and Capital One adapt to evolving search landscapes. He brings a practitioner's perspective on how CMOs must rewire discovery and demand generation for the AI SEO era. The next is Ethan. Ethan is the founder and CEO of Graphite, the growth consultancy behind breakout success stories like Masterclass, Robinhood, Webflow, and Notion. We have definitely heard about these companies. Known as one of the Silicon Valley's leading growth strategists, Ethan specializes in building scalable data-driven marketing systems. His insights will help CMOs understand how to build durable growth playbooks in the AI-first discovery environment. We also have Jesse. He's the founder and CEO of Gateway X, a venture studio building the next generation of customer businesses, a serial entrepreneur and the co-founder of Ampush. Jesse has scaled marketing-driven organizations from zero to hundreds of millions in revenue. He brings sharp insights into how CMOs can balance acquisition efficiency with brand building in this AI age. We also have Noah. He is the CEO of Stacker, a platform that helps brands and publishers scale storytelling and syndication to drive authority and visibility. With a background in both journalism and technology, he offers a unique lens on how CMOs can build trust signals, reputation, visibility in the AI-powered search ecosystems. Moderating this, we have Anirudh. Co-founder and CEO of Pepper. He leads this entire thought with us, and he has pioneered AI plus human content strategies through Pepper's platforms, including Nimbus and our new platform Atlas, which helps enterprises win visibility in the AI search area. There's nobody better at Pepper to tell you about this than Anirudh. And Anirudh, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dia. I think, first of all, it's such a pleasure to have some of the best minds in the industry out here. I think everyone's unique thought leader in this category, and everyone brings amazing insights. So, just very happy for the panel. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Quickly jumping on, search is being rewritten by AI. Discovery, trust, and visibility now live inside generative engines. What does winning the new search game mean to all of you? And probably want to start with maybe Jesse and go across the table.
Yeah, I'm old now, so I've lived through a lot of these cycles. I started my career when Google AdWords and was the dominant platform, and then literally was there with Facebook from the time they were at 800 million in revenue through 100 billion. And in some ways, now we've got another one of these things happening, and in some ways, a lot changes. The platforms change and everything. You can think of like the OTT, like Netflix and HBO. It's like, well, 30 years ago, they were all cable. There was no such thing as Netflix. But what worked back then, it was like great content. It was thinking about the customers. There was a whole set of things that didn't really change through the platform shift. So, I'll let Ethan and the AEO experts talk more about the actual tactical stuff. But from my lens, you still have to think a lot about the user and the customers and how they're asking questions and how they're prompting, and then make sure your answers are good and they're actually solving and answering the question. And then that's the sort of evergreen way to think about it, which is make sure that you're actually serving the customer and answering the question.
Makes sense. Ethan, over to you.
Jesse. Yeah, I would agree. And part of what you're saying is that there's different channels that evolve, and the fundamentals are similar, which is what content are people interested in, but the particulars of how the algorithms determine what good content is, or like the correct content for the services change. So, like Facebook used to have Facebook groups or organic content. And good content was useful there, but then good content changes when it's paid ads or for Reddit or for all these other services. So I think that the particulars of what good content is change. And specifically for chat, what good content is the way I think about it is AEO is similar to SEO, except the head and the tail are different. And so for the head, you need to focus on offsite, which is if you want to be the best website builder, it's not enough for Webflow to have their URL ranked number one. They need to also have G2, Reddit, YouTube, all these other services say that they're the best website builder. And then the second one is the tail. And I think that to good content, the tail is what's interesting because chat is built to answer follow-up questions and have conversations, whereas search is built to search once and get the answer immediately. And chat is built to have many follow-up questions. And many of the follow-up questions have never been answered. And so good content for the tail is answering all these follow-up questions. So best website builder with this feature, with this use case, with this language, like all these very specific things. Good content for LLMs that's different from search is having content that answers all these follow-up questions. So an example with Rippling is we have a page where it says all the features that Rippling has specifically for HR directors or specifically for finance directors, because those people have different questions than the the engineering director. And so I think the new different type of good content is this tail content that says what are all the things that your product can do.
That's super insightful, Ethan. Love the analogy. Noah, what do you think?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of debate over what acronym is going to win out. And when you think about what it means to win in this new search, I think that for me, SEO means search everywhere optimization. And that, in the old world, if you ranked number one on Google, you kind of had it made and you could say, okay, we have our strategy figured out. And whether it's Google, whether it's Reddit, whether it's YouTube, whether it's ChatGPT, or whether it's, all the other LLMs that I think over time are going to make up a large percentage of searches as well, that it's no longer optimizing for one platform. It's really thinking about a search everywhere optimization strategy, which to me is one of the biggest differences.
And Travis, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I will go on a more on a more tactical level, in that these AI platforms are also tools that allow us to analyze data faster, spin up strategies faster than ever before, identify strategies that previously would have taken a team. You can now do this with using these tools a lot better. But as the famous Brittany Muller says, AI advancement is not going to come from the next model update. It's really about integrating it into your existing workflows and automations that you already have set up. And to me, to win in this new AI search game, it's not a matter of developing a bunch of AI slop, but improving the workflows that already win and doing that at scale even faster.
And Travis, just doubling down on what you said, do you really believe traditional SEO and GEO will coexist, or they'll end up cannibalizing each other?
It's early days still. Early data definitely shows that they are coexisting and even expanding each other. We are seeing more people are searching on Google post ChatGPT launching than before. I will also say that the AI platforms are very dependent on traditional search engines. ChatGPT uses Bing and Google whenever it does a search. So that in and of itself shows that dependency and that coexistence. Some quippy folks in the industry would say that ChatGPT is nothing more than a fancy Google wrapper. I'm not sure I hold that belief, but I've definitely heard that said quite a few times. And I think that shows the dependence on it. The caveat here, bringing it back to Jesse's point, is when these platforms really take hold, they can and they do drive different behavior, search behavior, consumer behavior. And I think keeping a pulse on how that behavior is changing for your audience and identifying where your audience is your audience on ChatGPT, or is your audience older and they're actually just sticking to Google or Bing? Having a pulse on where your audience is and building strategies unique to each of those audiences, in my opinion, is how you future-proof, no matter if traditional SEO and GEO coexist or cannibalize each other.
And that's a very interesting perspective, Travis. And Ethan, as you think about building these growth playbooks with CMOs, where the old metrics around SEO, no longer capture impact, how do you really, build this entire playbook of sorts when, the funnel's not clean or not as clear?
Yes. So I don't think SEO is dead. All the metrics for SEO stay the same. There's a new channel. So the new channel is LLMs, and the key thing is that most of the answers are not very clickable. They're mostly zero click answers, and so you cannot just look at referring domain last click to do attribution. So ultimately, we want conversions, and how we can best track conversions is to ask a question after the conversion about how did you hear about us, and that's not specific to LMs. That's just in general. For the higher the consideration, you have many touch points. So for a Webflow, you've probably seen Webflow 100 times, and even if you have last click attribution, it's still probably wrong because it's going to ignore the other 99 touch points. So I think you need to ask how did you hear about us? Question number one. Number two is you might want to do something more sophisticated, like a incrementality, mixed media model type stuff. Most people don't have the resources for that, but if you do, I would recommend that. And then how do you, what happens before that? So you can't really track clicks. I would look at clicks, but that's going to tell you a tiny fraction of the actual impact. So ultimately, what I think you need to do is figure out which questions you care about, set up those questions in a tracking tool. We have a tracking tool. We have a page with 60 other tracking tools. So just pick one of the 60 tools, put your questions in, and then look to see how often you're showing up. So share a voice, and you can have your questions by groups, and then you say, well, what is the percentage of the time that I show up? What is the rank that I show up? And how do I compare against my competitors? So you could basically track the very beginning, which is, am I appearing for the answer? And the very end, which is, did someone say that I heard about us? I heard about you from an LLM. So that's how I think about it. But I wouldn't say that SEO is dead. I would just say that this is a brand new channel, and you have less fidelity in the tracking. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, and I think I talk to a lot of founders, and people really fall into analysis paralysis when it comes to, oh my God, I can't track every last click from this, therefore I'm not going to do it. And I think what Ethan said about just get comfortable with the fidelity that it's at, that doesn't mean you don't play in it. It just means that you optimize it against the fidelity. And I think he mentioned this a little bit in passing, but the post-purchase survey feels like one of the best things for almost any type of business that's out there doing marketing, because it really gives you an answer to something, and you will see all of the LLMs showing up on it today in any business you're running. And so again, I would encourage people, you don't have to go crazy on it in terms of spending and stuff, but if you try to hold the bar that you held for SEO or paid search or whatever to this platform, you're going to miss the boat, and that's a silly thing to do.
And I would actually just add one thing. The harder it is to track, the better, because things that are easy to track have an efficient market, and there's very little upside to do better than somebody else. So the more mess and the more difficulty tracking, the more opportunity is to have an information advantage and exploit the stuff that everyone else can't see.
I think that's a lot of practical insights in very little sentences. Thanks for that, Ethan. Jesse, just curious, how are you seeing performance marketing dollars and spend shift as AI search compresses the funnel? And are you seeing, I know we're talking a lot about GEO today, but with soon all of these companies building ad monetization models, especially OpenAI hired Fiji Simon, who built this at Meta, and you know that better than most. Yep. How are you seeing this change come next?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in touch with the team there. Obviously, given my involvement with Facebook, there's people that are getting ready to build some kind of a platform. I mean, it's somewhat of an obvious thing, right? If you have eyeballs and you have search information, you're going to have an ad system there. So, but it's anytime we talk to CMOs about paid search and SEO, and I'm sure everyone on the panel would agree, like they're sort of cousins. Like you generally, if you're good, especially at SEO, you'll be good at paid search because you know what people are clicking on, what they're buying. They're definitely going to be sort of this symbiotic group. And the best thing for marketers to do right now is focus on AEO. And then if and when an ad platform launches and how it launches, you'll be that much more ready to understand, how to play in the paid side of that landscape.
And just curious, Jesse, are you seeing, that with LLMs driving a lot more of these growths, how big a dent would this be with, spend on Google and Meta? Do you see a point of time where it could be almost equal to these platforms, spend on these LLMs?
I mean, it's kind of a simple answer. It ultimately just tracks MAUs. That's the actual top-down big answer. And like you said one thing, you said two different things, which is interesting. Will it be the size of them versus will it take share from them? And I can tell you that I spent a decade with Facebook, everyone going, oh my God, is it going to take money from Google? Is it going to take money from Google? Well, guess what? Google has kept growing throughout Facebook, going from 0 to 100 some odd $1 billion in revenue, in annual revenue. So you never saw Google. I mean, would Google have been bigger if Facebook never existed? I don't know. We can never know. But Google never really had issues. And frankly, it opened up new verticals for Google. For example, e-commerce, you could do demand gen and then people would come on search and then that would create more search ad monetization for Google. So I definitely view all these things as highly symbiotic and actually growing. The share will grow. I don't know if you guys have gotten your mail lately, but I still get freaking direct mail. And so like there's plenty of older school, crappier things that still need to go out of business, right? I mean, radio ads, like, so I think the market's going to get bigger and bigger. And the answer to your question specifically around numbers is I would just look at MAUs and I would do like but that's how Facebook ultimately, again, top down, was like, how many users did they have? That's what drove monetization. And it's like a revenue per user type monetization.
That makes a ton of sense. And Noah, over to you. How are trust signals like reviews, mentions, and content syndication evolving in this era? I saw a graph for your business going very steep. So just curious, what is the momentum you're seeing with content syndication?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, a lot of the tailwind for us is the research that third parties have put out. I think, we're still in the 1997, 1998 Google SEO era where, a lot of people are doing their own research. There's no experts from ChatGPT coming out and saying how this works. But what it does feel like there is consensus around from a lot of different research is that brand mentions are highly, highly correlated with whether you're showing up in ChatGPT or being mentioned in ChatGPT. And that also that, as the Muckrack study showed, as many studies have showed, that earned media is a great way to get cited. Ethan mentioned both the long tail, but also kind of the head terms. And it does seem like for a lot of kind of head terms that earned media is what's being cited. And we are seeing that there's a lot of ways to do that. But getting cited, getting content that you're producing cited and published across third-party outlets has been a phenomenal way to do that, which we're seeing a lot of brands and their marketing teams double down on.
That's very interesting. And Travis, as brands look to upgrade themselves, according to you, what are priorities CMOs must push their own teams today to be AI ready? Are you seeing people rethinking their teams changes and relationships with partners?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of shifts happening in the space right now. In fact, just this morning I read Accenture laid off 11,000 folks in the last 3 days to shift toward an AI first strategy, and they're reskilling their other 70,000 something employees. So I think a lot of executives are having a very critical view on what skill sets their teams are ultimately bringing to the stage, and that I do think AI adoption is critical in any role. And again, improving those workflows. On the AI search visibility front, I think it is hypercritical for CMOs to push their teams to focus more on technical SEO than they probably ever have before. Things like server-side rendering, getting rid of JavaScript, making sure content format is in a really great spot, ease of purchase. Your products and services are actually available to platforms like Google Shopping and ChatGPT just launched their own shopping, right? Making sure that all of that stuff is actually accessible and scalable in these platforms, I think is absolutely critical in terms of success in this AI era.
Makes sense. And Ethan, given you've been in the ecosystem for a long time, are you seeing the role of agencies evolve, especially with GEO and SEO changing? You mentioned there's 60 tools out there. Like, what frankly do you see? Is there a standalone SaaS play in GEO, or do you see it's going to be a mixture of platform plus services or agencies evolving for better models?
Both. I think you'll have self-serve tools just like you have self-serve SEO tools. But if you give someone if you give a random person Ahrefs, they don't know what to do with it. And even if you give a skilled person an Ahrefs, you still can't do most of your SEO strategy. So you need an agency, and the same is true for answer engine optimization. So you'll first every service categories, probably most service categories will exist. A few will be removed. The majority of them will stay around. Marketing will exist for a very long time. So I don't see that being replaced. I do think that you'll have AI tech-enabled services. There's two forms of tech-enabled services or AI-enabled services. What most people are talking about is a cheaper version of services where Noah, I say, hey, would you ask ChatGPT these 5 questions and string them together and then repackage them into a PDF and send it to the client? So that's one form. I don't think it's that interesting, but everyone's going to be using tools, and we'll be using ChatGPT tools. No one would never do that, of course. But the other version is better. And so I think that what's actually interesting is using AI tools to have better services as opposed to a much cheaper, slightly worse version. So that's what I think will happen, where that's what we're building, is tools to help make this stuff better. Because ultimately what matters as an agency is the renewal rates. And the renewal rate increases as a result of improved quality, not on cost reduction and slight quality reduction.
I completely agree, Ethan. Thanks for sharing that view. And just balancing across another point, and Jesse, this is to you. See, a lot of short-term plays are happening with Geo, where people want to it's like get rich quick kind of views on Geo, and how can you capture attention quickly? How should CMOs balance storytelling with short-term acquisition? With AI as a discovery layer, and how should they really play the long-term game? Jesse, you're on mute. Yeah.
In this case, we obviously have a good previous example with Google, which was, there was times for years where people would do certain things in Google land and they would rank quickly and that would be good. And then one day an algorithm update would ship and people would lose half their traffic. And so, it's a little bit of like, I don't know, what you reap, you'll sow. So if I was a CMO, again, I would be thinking about back to the top of the conversation. How do I put high quality stuff? How do I get the answers out there? How do I do the long tail, like Ethan said? How do I make sure my story is the right story? And hopefully, by the way, with AI, I mean, it's funny, you think about how search works for a second. And I always reflect on this. 100 people search for something. 40 of them click on the first organic result. 10% click on the first paid result. Of them, like 1% convert on the organic result and 5% convert on the paid result. So out of 100 people, maybe one customer shows up. I think one of the promises of the LLMs and AI should be that rate actually goes up downstream a lot, because it's actually customizing and giving the right answer to the right person. But if you're a CMO, that means you got to own yourself more fully. And you have to have the ability to tell your story to the different people. And that ends up allowing you not just to get more traffic, but better traffic. And I think that's the thing I would think a lot about if I was a CMO, is to own your story, own who your customers are, because it'll actually help the LLMs to get you the right people. And that, that's obviously what the Facebook algo has done with AI way before AI was cool.
I absolutely agree with everything Jesse said. The other thing I would add is I think it is critical for CMOs to have a testing roadmap and be asking their teams on how are you testing into these AI search platforms? How are you testing into these AI tools? And keeping a pulse on those advancements, so then you really kind of build that culture of test and learn. So then you can gain those short-term wins in the meantime.
And no, I think that's a great perspective, Jesse and Travis. Just curious, given we're talking about brand and storytelling, I know you work with so many managing editors in your business. Given the world's moving towards shorter summaries, more chunkable, consumable content, and so on, what kind of content does really break through and earn visibility? And what are you seeing with your business?
So I'd say the biggest bifurcation from what worked with Google versus what works with ChatGPT when it comes to brands, thinking about what types of more top of funnel content can we put out, is data-driven content versus more subjective or qualitative top of funnel content. Historically, obviously HubSpot was kind of the arbiter of this and got very big on it, and plenty, of the how-to content and the what is content and any kind of general, someone's going to ask this question and we want to have the best answer on the internet. The reality is, for most of the queries on ChatGPT, they're not even citing a third party. They're just kind of scraping a bunch of content and giving their own answer. And so that type of content really does not have a chance of winning in LLMs for the most part. What does have a chance of winning in LLMs is anything with data. So anytime you search something in ChatGPT or other LLMs that has data that might have changed yesterday or last year, they are citing the source. And that is that ranges from anything about weather to stock prices to, what car was most popular last month and everything in between. But we are seeing that content with data is kind of the low-hanging fruit or the most surefire way to produce content that is likely to get picked up in ChatGPT. If you go a level deeper, think, there's differences in how you publish the content than when you thought about SEO. So, ChatGPT can't read through iframes. So you need to actually be publishing data tables as HTML on your web page. I think people have spoken about, delivering content in kind of a question and answer format. So making sure that content is readable, providing summaries and bullets at the top of content, and making sure that if you are publishing data, that it's very readable to LLMs.
And as you think about all of that, what are really KPIs that CMOs or boards should be actually tracking as discovery moves here to these things? Anything tangible that you've been able to figure out? And this is a broader question to the entire group. Anyone who wants to go on that?
I would focus on post-purchase surveys for now. I think that's going to be by far your best bet. And you have, like Ethan said, you have to do it with the fidelity that you're receiving the information at.
Yeah, at the end of the day, no one really knows how many times a given search query is being searched. And my results and Jesse's results are going to be different for a given query. So I agree. It's, you need to track what data you can first party, but beyond that, it's following trends in your own data.
Post-purchase is useful. I also think pre-purchase is really useful, and doing user experience studies to say, what platforms are you using to make this decision? What ultimately led to this discovery? That can very much help you align an appropriate media mix and focus on what platforms ultimately matter. Obviously, depends on product and company size and all of that in terms of how feasible that is. But if you have budget for it, I think that it will definitely pay dividends, and it certainly has for our clients.
I think post-purchase surveys are the most direct measure. I think also visibility is interesting. To Noah's point, we don't have true question or prompt volume. We have to guess, but I do think that but again, I think that that's an opportunity. So, because if you don't have clean data and you are good at indirectly measuring, then you have an information advantage relative to others. So I think that what I would suggest would be, for someone like a Webflow, what are all the personas that you're targeting? What are the decisions that people make that they need to make in order to decide whether to use Webflow versus Framer versus something else? Basically create a persona map and a decision tree, and then find questions, make an assumption about what the questions might be, and then look at your visibility there. And this is not precise, but also the fact that it's not precise is an opportunity, because if you are doing a better job of indirectly measuring, then you have an information advantage and you can beat other people.
And just as we also think through, the way the ecosystem's rapidly evolving. Just yesterday, OpenAI launched agentic commerce, where you can now, buy Etsy via ChatGPT, and the Shopify did a lot of things with these platforms. How you seeing, brands now think about that? Like with Pepper, we've been working with all these big CPG brands for the longest time, and Unilever, P&Gs of the world, and they never really cared a lot about SEO because most of their business came from distribution and retail. And suddenly all of them are coming and asking about, hey, how can we optimize on geo? Because suddenly your shopping lists are being built on LLMs choosing the best reviewed products. So what does the broader group think about that? Agentic commerce, how does that change brands, consumer approaches, and how can one think about that in advance?
Yeah, I would just double down on that technical SEO importance and really making sure that these agents can even access all of the information that you have, even down to like very specific product information of what size is the product and who is it for, what is it used for, because that type of personalized information is what is getting pulled into these platforms as people start sharing more and more of their life with these platforms in a logged in state. It's going to be able to build a far more robust understanding of the individual than any previous search engine before. So making sure that they can access all of your information and you're feeding that with the appropriate content is crucial.
Yeah, I'll take the slightly different. I agree with that, but I think a slightly higher level approach if you're a CMO, and like the most important thing you can do right now is create a culture of trying these things and understanding them and being around and in front of them. Because this agentic commerce thing is super exciting. I don't think it's going to change anything next month or next quarter, or maybe even next year. Like in 5 years, it'll change a ton. And Ampush, we had our own pixel before. We predated the Facebook pixel. There was no Facebook pixel. We had a pixel. That was one of our unique selling propositions that was quickly wiped out. And so just keep in mind for anyone who's thinking about this, we're probably 2% of the way into the journey of what it's going to look like in 10 to 15 years. And so to think that, it's also dangerous in some sense to build too much too soon on what's here today, because the stuff will evolve very, very rapidly. And so it's important to be in front of it, understand it, be early to it in certain cases. But the most important thing you can do is build a culture that's knowing what's going on, finding ways to experiment and play with it, like playing around with it and staying up to beat in kind of what's going on with these platforms, because they will evolve. That's the one thing I can promise everyone is they're all going to evolve incredibly rapidly.
I'll take a slightly contrarian opinion. I mean, to me, agentic commerce is basically just having schema and then having a shopping carousel in Google. I don't actually see the large difference. I think that it might change in the future, but to me, Google has, quote, agentic commerce right now. You search for the best camera and then you get a shopping carousel with schema, and then you can buy ads eventually. Now, maybe there's future-facing stuff, but to me, this is just sort of a ChatGPT, including things that Google already has with basically the same technology. And to Travis's point, I think the one thing that might be different is just feeding the algorithm a ton of information, because Chat's made for all these very specific use cases, which Google is not. And so feeding more and more data, maybe like reviews, maybe a bunch of tags that you wouldn't give to Google, giving it to the LM so that the LM knows, yes, this camera with this feature and this use case and all this stuff, yes, it's relevant for that. I was looking at an example of a company, I forget exactly, there was an AI orchestration platform. And then I asked, well, does this AI orchestration platform company. It was UiPath. Do they have this use case and this use case, which they actually had? And then ChatGPT says, well, I'm not convinced that they have it because I don't have enough information about whether or not they fulfill this use case. So I think figuring out what the long tail looks like for products, and then having content that feeds into that, that's what I think that is different. But the actual technology, I think, is basically just schema, and the experience is, going to be pretty similar to what Google Commerce has. It's just that the long tail will be larger.
Noah, anything to add on?
I mean, just to tack on to Jesse's point about the importance of experimenting and building that into your culture, and where this question started, a la Unilever didn't care about SEO, and these big brands are starting to care a lot about winning in LLMs. Is on one hand, we haven't seen a paradigm shift like this in 20 plus years, and the reality is those who figured out SEO first toppled the incumbents in their space or built a moat that couldn't be overcome, right? So, part of the reason that NerdWallet wins out for most personal finance terms is because they've been doing great backlinking and building domain authority for decades. And think, you pulled out with Unilever, is it that it's going to be LLM created shopping lists? Is it going to be something else? I think a lot of CMOs are realizing, I don't know exactly how this is going to work, but this is going to be a paradigm shift, and that could happen in 6 months or that could happen in 6 years, but people do not want to be left behind. The contrast to that I think is really interesting, and this has been one of the most fascinating things playing around with ChatGPT just in my spare time and cribbing from Ethan's podcast with Lenny, is just that with SEO, things did take months to see the results. You couldn't get a backlink and then say, did my results change yesterday? Especially for highly competitive terms. Whereas with ChatGPT, you can get one citation and the next day see, oh, that's driving traffic to my site, or I am now winning for a given query. And so it's really interesting to think about experimentation with such more rapid information feedback loops. But I think that's part of the reason why I think a lot of these larger companies are starting to take a hand in it. Whether or not they invest long term in it, TBD. It could turn into SEO for Unilever, but I think right now they realize it's too big of an opportunity to say, we'll figure this out.
Yeah. And, Noah, just to add on to another question for you, I don't know if you've been hearing this term AI slop being used a lot more, and especially with this entire, wave of AI content tools, generating shit ton of quality, hopefully good quality content is what they were claiming. Do you really see now there's more premium to more human in the loop with respect to these things?
So I think, what we've seen is when it comes to brands producing content, they're going to be one of the last ones to have fully produced AI content. I think if you're running Sports Illustrated or Newsweek and your business model is to produce 10,000 articles a month and break even on every given article, then there's a lot of incentive to bring the cost of content production down. But if you are Experian or Square and you're thinking about, I need to create a really specific piece of content that has my voice and doesn't tarnish my brand and has a very specific use case, a la showing up for a given set of queries or to earn citations from third-party publications, that the value of that piece of content does not need to back out on I spent $100, did I make $101 on this piece of content? They're taking a much longer view. And so I think the savviest brands are not saying, okay, we're just going to produce 10,000 pieces of content from AI. Are they pulling human in the loop and leveraging AI, to create outlines, to help do research? Definitely. But most of the brands we're working with are not saying, hey, let's just do this all with generative AI.
Anyone else who wants to weigh in?
So I think clearly AI assisted content is the future, just like there are all these creator apps that came from the internet, like there's Instagram and TikTok and all these things that make it way easier to create content. And there'll be a whole creator set of apps for AI. Clearly that's the future. I would focus on AI making things better. So not auto-generating tons of things with no human in the loop, but making it better. Noah talked about having unique data sets. So we work with this company, CMO, which is a doctor for Reddit, where doctors say they gave a drug and what happened. And then we have an AI summary describing what the doctors said. And that page does very well. I think it ranks number 3 for a bunch of drug plus rating queries. Also, G2 does very well, where it's a summary of their review content, which is all unique and useful. So I think having number 1, having a human in the loop, and then number 2, having some sort of unique data that's not just ChatGPT, write me 10,000 articles. That's how I think about it.
Yep. No, makes a lot of sense. And I think to a lot of customers and CMOs thinking through this, I think it's still topical authority has highest value. You still, if a lot of our customers come to us saying, "Hey, do we need 10,000 articles or 100 articles or 2 articles?" And I think the goal is, as long as you can build topical coverage across whatever you care about, I think that solves for a lot of things. Jumping to a last question from my end for all of you, and as CMOs think about investments in their marketing budgets in their teams, obviously they're seeing a lot of change with AI. How can CMOs think about making their teams AI ready, and any specific investments that companies should think about in terms of their content teams, search teams, performance teams, and how should they evolve with that? There's some companies out there who are using the term content engineers as well, where you can think about building smarter workflows, enabling teams to be much more AI evolved. But what's all of your take on that? Jesse, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think, I talk to a lot of CMOs, and it's like everybody's aware of this. It's making everyone nauseous, by the way, because of the pace at which stuff is coming out. And humans, we're still humans. Like, we can't adopt these things all this quickly. But if you ask most CMOs, so about all this stuff, why aren't you doing anything yet? Or why are you only? They'll give you the same answer. Like, nobody on my team knows how to use these tools. Nobody knows how to prompt. No one knows how to set up the MCP to do blah, blah, and blah. And so I would actually just keep it really simple. I mean, at Growth Assistant, for example, we have all these global employees. We're doing a massive reskilling of AI. We're training them on each of their individual jobs. And here's how you're a designer if you're going to use AI. Here's how you'd prompt with it. Here's how you use the tools. I think it's pretty basic actually right now. If I was a leader anywhere, which is first things first, everyone's got to shift the way they do work. And today, if I want to show you some projections under it, it's second nature to pull up Excel or Google Docs. It's just the way we do work. But that's not what it was 20 years ago or whatever, 30, and that's kind of where we are now. And so in 5 years, it'll just be the way we do work. But it's really basic right now. Like, just get your team to know how to write a decent prompt, and then let them know how to set up make a custom GPT. Some of these things, they sound fancy, but they're pretty basic, and most people have no idea how to do them yet.
I completely agree. Noah, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, to Jesse's point, just becoming an expert or having an in-house expert. You and I were joking back in the state before we came on stage in this virtual world, how we found each other on LinkedIn. I have become a presence in LinkedIn, not by doing a ton of original research, but by consuming a lot of white papers and putting them back out into the world in a little bit more easy to digest format. And I think that there's something to be said for just making sure that you're staying on top of this. The next thing, just kind of going back to where this started along the lines of search everywhere, is, you saw, if people didn't see, Ramp hired a Redditor that's full-time role is going to be on Reddit and answering questions about Ramp. I don't think that's the last time we see a company do that. Stacker's whole business is working with brands that have hired managing editors or editors in chief, where brands are hiring journalists to put out really authoritative, data-driven content. We've seen a huge uptick in that over the past 6 months as GEO has become a bigger investment category. So I think that, thinking about what are the things I need to do and making really intentional bets is going to be something we see a lot of.
No, and you're absolutely right, because just OpenAI had launched this managing editor or head of content post. I think it was a content strategist. And there's this entire debacle on LinkedIn in terms of, coming whole circle. But I completely agree that a lot of people are now looking. I think brand is the only lasting channel, which a lot of companies should continue to double down, invest on, and completely wholly agree to you. Travis, what are your last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, brand has always been the channel of marketing to really drive performance, right? And I think the last few decades of performance marketing has given people a lot of false sense of security, relying on data that probably didn't totally make sense to begin with, but we told ourselves it did. And now we're back at a stage, to Ethan's point, where this data is more complex. You have to have implied attribution as opposed to straightforward attribution. So in terms of a CMO's mind and an investment, I would focus less on trying to find the raw numbers and more on your audience, scaling the efforts and work that your marketing team do that are going to drive brand forward for those audiences. So scaling content creation, scaling personalization of your products and services and those use cases. In my mind, having that audience first approach has always won in marketing and will continue to win in marketing.
Great thought, Travis. Ethan, any concluding remarks?
Yeah, when people ask me what SEO tools they should use and should they use this SEO tool that costs thousands of dollars, my answer is you could probably spend no money at all or $100 a month. So my suggestion, and same is true for AEO. So for SEO, I say use Google Search Console, which is free. Use Google Analytics, which is also free. And then if you really want to spend money, spend it on probably a content scoring tool like a ClearScope or a Pepper, or a Surfer or like Ahrefs, which is $100 a month. The same is going to be true for answer engine optimization. All this stuff is a commodity. So what's the most incredible keyword tracking tool? It doesn't matter. It's all just scraping whether or not you showed up. So same is true for AEO. Probably there'll be some sort of ChatGPT search console someday. Looking forward to that. In the meantime, I would pick the cheapest tool that does whatever it is that you need to be done. My tool set's probably going to be something like answer tracking, number one. Probably content workflows is number two. Maybe there's stuff like Noah was describing around offsite content creation, like a Reddit marketing tool or a LinkedIn marketing tool or something like that. That's probably what my tool suite would be.
Amazing. No, I think this has been super delightful. I think very practical insights from some of the best practitioners